Hi, I'm back and we are going to get right into module one, which is the building blocks of eating well. This is, you know, focused on women in the first trimester of pregnancy. And if you are in a community setting where you have a lot of interest for women who are considering pregnancy, um, even a year before, this is a great class that you could offer to your community and to talk about the importance of early pregnancy. The fact is that many women, I think it's something like 50% of women don't even know they're pregnant, or it's not a planned pregnancy. So doing that pre-preparation for pregnancy when you're contemplating or thinking or in a position where you could become pregnant, you could even use this as a preconception class. But certainly for women in their early stages in the first trimester of pregnancy. The objectives of Module 1 are for your patients and clients to gain a basic understanding of DOHAD and realize that the choices during pregnancy can influence the health outcomes of not only their developing baby, but future family members. Become aware of what is a balanced pregnancy diet and why is it important to select healthy whole foods? Why is it important to continue to take prenatal supplements? Appreciate that more calories are not needed during the first trimester. That's often a misconception. We don't want to necessarily have women eating a lot more. We want them to be eating more nutrient dense or so-called better calories that they would get from whole nutrient rich foods. Because morning sickness is so common during early pregnancy, we're going to talk about that too. And that is a real barrier sometimes, even when you have the intention or the resources to eat well, and yet you just don't feel well at all. And the thought of food is, just makes you ill. So we'll talk a little bit about working through that and also understanding the importance of food safety during pregnancy. Food safety is always important for a family, but especially during pregnancy. When you start the class, it's important to really get to know your patients and clients. And some of you may be in a community where you already really know everybody. Maybe you're in a larger urban area, but at any rate, just trying to really elicit feedback from your participants is very important in establishing rapport and trust, and they're going to be more likely to listen and interact with you if they feel like it's a partnership, and they're going to be more likely to want to come back to the other classes that are in this curriculum. So pass out a note card at the beginning of every class, and each module will have them write down different things. So you're just getting to know them. So maybe asking them what are their hopes for their future child or children. Uh, and then how about a favorite fruit or vegetable to pull it back to nutrition? And any question at all that they might have about food and nutrition. Maybe you know the answer, maybe you don't. I'm a dietitian. I still have to look things up all the time, but it's a great way to learn for your participants and also for you. Then ask your participants to introduce themselves. And if they're comfortable, share one or more of the items they recorded on their note cards. So again, it's optional. You may have someone who's a little more shy and introverted, but just invite them to introduce themselves. And if they'd like to share one of those three things they put on their card, that would be a great way to have a good discussion. If they have questions, if they did put a question about food or nutrition, record any of those and make sure to address those during this session. And again, you might have to look up the information or get back to them, but just encouraging them to answer questions and interact. And then discuss that you will spend this session reviewing the basics of early pregnancy and why it's so important to eat well and take appropriate prenatal supplements. So you learned a lot about DOHAT in the pre-module. We want your participants to understand that basic science too. So these are some basic points that you can review with developmental origins of health and disease. Again, we don't want to get too bogged down in the science, the nitty-gritty, but for them to understand will help them to possibly motivate them to want to really focus on nutrition and their lifestyle and their health. So the egg that eventually became all of us began in the womb of our grandmother. And DOHAT, the developmental origins of health and disease, impacts our whole lifetime health. That first 1,000 days from conception to around age 2 are when we form a lot of our brain and also body and organ systems. And it is nutrition, which we're focusing on. And during pregnancy, that is a key factor in growth, development, health, and birth weight. Stresses such as racism, poverty, and toxic substances all impact your developing fetus. And early pregnancy is a critical time for development. So this module focuses on the first trimester or for women who are contemplating pregnancy. This is a picture of my grandson who is now 10 months old, and this was in his very first weeks of life. And you can see the brain and spine are beginning to form in very early pregnancy. And just the very first few 5 or 6 weeks, you're starting to see what we call the neural tube. The neural tube is the early embryonic brain and spinal cord. And so they are starting to form. And what we learned, and there were policy changes back in the 80s and 90s in terms of even our food supply. We started to see that women who had healthy levels of folate in their blood during early pregnancy dramatically reduced the risk of what we call neural tube defects, which can affect our spinal column as well as our brains. One of the most common conditions is spina bifida. And when the United States started fortification of folic acid in our food supply, we saw a dramatic decline in the incidence of neural tube defects. So folic acid is the synthetic form of folate, and folate is what we find in a lot of our foods, such as greens. So there is some confusion. Folic acid and folate are essentially the same in terms of their conversion in our body. You might look at your prenatal supplement and notice that it has folic acid, but whole foods will have natural folate. Same basic nutrient that does kind of the same thing. And again, very important for that brain and spine development. And this slide will hopefully help you to explain that. So folate-rich foods that just have naturally occurring folate. I highlight some of those, some of the vegetables, dark greens, oranges, and citrus, beef liver, a lot of nuts, and also legumes such as kidney beans and black-eyed peas are natural sources of folate. And it isn't that that's better or worse, they're just different. When we fortify foods with folate, we use a different chemical called folic acid, and that's also what is in prenatal supplements. So, what the US did is we started to fortify things like enriched breads and grains, pastas and flours, anything that says enriched, or fortified breakfast cereals, such as the ones you would get in the WIC program, enriched rice. Those are all fortified with folic acid now. So that has been a big protective factor. And it's important when looking for grains. So, not every single grain will be enriched or fortified. So, it is important that they look for, like, say, uh, a corn tortilla that is made with enriched cornmeal. So let's talk about on a bigger scale. Folate and folic acid are very important, but as I mentioned in the prior module, there are over 40 nutrients that our body needs to function and to build a better baby. So there is a handout, and it's called Building a Better Plate. And that is in your packet and available online. So, reviewing Building a Better Plate will give an overview of the key nutrients, the importance of eating a balance from all the food groups, and how to even obtain a daily food plan from My Plate. The choosemyplate.gov has a lot of resources for pregnancy and lactation, and also recommendations for choosing a prenatal supplement. In general, when you're looking at prenatal supplements, it is important that you get one with iron. There are gummies out there, and the problem with gummies is they often do not have iron. So, women who take a gummy prenatal supplement have to then go get an additional iron supplement. So, I generally recommend just using, a tablet or pill form, and women can talk to their providers, but avoiding the gummies just so you're not thinking about missing iron or other nutrients. Gummies taste, like candy, and iron does not really taste very yummy. So that's why often the gummy vitamins do not have iron. Another handout that I think I really like that we worked on with the WIC program is called A Dozen Pregnant Friendly Foods. And the idea there was that, we didn't want women to feel that they had to spend, a lot of money or, outside their budget for food. So A Dozen Pregnancy Friendly Foods has things like canned salmon, carrots, eggs, bananas, berries, legumes, milk, oatmeal, potatoes, peanut butter, spinach, sunflower seeds. So those are very nutrient dense and more budget friendly. And almost all of those foods are eligible for purchase using the WIC program. So for your patients and clients on the WIC program, we wanted to highlight that because that's something that you always hear. I can't afford to eat healthy. I can't afford to eat whole foods. So I think you'll find that along with the Building a Better Plate to be very helpful. You may get questions even in very early pregnancy about weight gain. That could be a big concern with women about gaining too much weight or not gaining enough weight. It's a sensitive topic, and sometimes it's difficult to talk about. But as you get questions, it is important to reinforce that pregnancy is not a time for restriction. So you don't want to be restricting food intake and you don't want to lose weight. During the first trimester, it's not necessary to gain weight or eat extra calories, interestingly enough. While a lot of development is going on, the actual size of the fetus is very small. So the gradual weight gain will come during the second and third trimesters, and we'll talk about that more in future modules. So I would always steer them back to during pregnancy, it's important to choose whole foods with more nutrients relative to calories. In other words, nutrient dense or better calories. And that just comes down to whole fruits, more than juices, vegetables, whole grains, more than the refined grains, dairy, milk, yogurt, and cheese, or if they can't do dairy, then other calcium fortified types of alternatives, and healthy proteins. So healthy proteins can be, your seafood, lean meat, and poultry, but also beans, nuts, seeds, eggs, soy. And I should emphasize safe seafood that is lower in mercury, because that's a concern too. And we also want to choose foods that are not going to make us ill. Pregnancy is somewhat of an immune compromised condition. And the reason why the immune system is affected is because nature doesn't want a mom to think, to reject the fetus as a foreign matter. So your immune system is kind of tamped down, so you're not having that type of rejection. But that also makes you more susceptible to harmful bacteria and viruses. You've probably even heard of like listeria, which is very concerning in pregnancy, that we can get from soft, unpasteurized cheeses. So there is a Playing It Safe handout that you can go over with participants that talks about safe seafood. It talks about minimizing the risk of bacterial and viral illness as well. And that handout is in your packet. The best advice about eating well is difficult if you're having morning sickness. So between 70 and 85% of pregnant women will have some degree of nausea and vomiting, especially in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy. And so it's important to reinforce that, we're all doing our best. We're not going for perfection. We're kind of presenting what the ideal perfect nutrition is, but reality is if we're feeling, nauseous, it's going to be difficult. So reassuring is important. And then there is also a quieting that queasy feeling handout. I think this is also a great time to have a discussion and sharing, because the participants who are going through this may have things they want to share with each other that may have helped to alleviate their nausea. So, for instance, not having your partner make coffee first thing in the morning, sometimes that's a trigger. Or, I've heard all kinds of things. Sour, like a little lemon, a little vinegar, for some reason, oddly enough, tends to quiet your tummy a little bit. Never letting your stomach get completely empty. So you want to maybe have small snacks available, small healthy snacks, so that you're eating every hour or two to keep a little something in your stomach. Even things like ginger tea. So there's a whole variety of strategies, and also it's highly individual. And that's why sometimes participants will share with each other and get ideas on how they can alleviate that all day or morning nausea feeling. And then finally, I did include some recipes in this module. So lentil vegetable soup and spinach avocado salad. And I picked those both because they are really high in those nutrients that we're talking about. So, but in both cases, like the lentil soup is high in folate, it's high in fiber, it's high in protein, and a whole variety of other, the vegetables and the healthy legumes. And the spinach avocado salad with a citrus dressing, again, high in a lot of the different pregnancy nutrients, including folate, vitamin C, iron. Um, and also, it has that kind of a citrus or a sour that I was thinking of in terms of morning sickness. So, if the sour kind of a vinaigrette is helpful. If you have time and if you have a facility, it's really fun to demo recipes. The spinach avocado salad with citrus dressing is really easy, comes together really quickly, and you can provide samples. If you were to do something like the lentil vegetable soup, you could bring in a crock pot and prepare it ahead of time and then offer samples. And again, it's a very easy recipe to do as well. So at the end of each module, you will see this bringing about change, and it's going to be pretty consistent from module to module. You will first ask whether there are questions about the material, and then I always love to use the 1 to 10 motivation rating scale. So all that involves is, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to make a change today based on the information that you just learned? And so participants may share out loud or they may just contemplate it. But for instance, if I were meeting with an individual and they said, oh, maybe I'm about a 4 today on my motivation scale, with, 1 being low motivation and 10 being high. And then my next question would be, well, what would bring you up to say a 5 or 6? Why do you say 4? And they may give you some answers. Well, the reason why is, I'm busy and I'm working a lot, or I don't think I have enough money, or I have other children. So, then talking through what could happen to bring them up a little bit higher on their motivation rating scale. So that's something it's a really good way to have them think about behavior and behavior change and maybe how they can overcome some of the barriers. Then ask participants to turn over their note cards, the one where they wrote the 3 things, and record the following: 1 area of their diet that they would like to change, any difficulties or barriers they have, and then a specific action step that they can take to make this change. Encourage group discussion. Again, we're all learning from each other in the group. We're not just being top down, we're being very interactive, and they're speaking with each other. I always felt like when I was teaching classes that when my participants started giving each other, really helpful suggestions, and well, I tried this and I did this and I found that this works. I felt like that was a successful class. I mean, the ideas do not have to come from the leader. The leader is the facilitator. And then number 5, it's really important to follow up with participants. So again, this class is important because you want them to come back. So that's why maybe if you could do the recipe, a tasting, make it interactive so that people have a good feeling and your participants will want to come back. Then you can follow up on their progress on action steps and continue that goal setting and behavior change process. And I just give an example on each one. So an example is a goal might be to eat more dark greens. So they learned in this class that dark greens provide a lot of healthy pregnancy nutrients, but maybe their family doesn't like dark green. They think it's not affordable, or they don't have stores or markets that supply a lot of fresh greens. So a specific action step might be to purchase frozen spinach. Spinach tends to be one of the most affordable, or maybe it's summer and they have a farmer's market, or they could even grow it in a small home garden. And spinach also, in addition to being affordable, it tends to be one of the more mild greens. So it can be used in many ways and it can be added to all kinds of dishes: lasagna, soup, sauces, stews, omelets. You take like a great big container of spinach and it cooks down to a very small amount that you can chop and kind of even hide it into things, and you're still getting all that. So that's just one example that you could talk about as they're setting their own action plans.